The rain came down like judgment that October evening, turning the dusty main street of Dust Hollow into a river of mud. The stagecoach lurched to a stop beside the general store, its wheels sinking deep into the mire. Nora Estelle Reed gripped her medical bag tighter as she stepped down, her boots immediately disappearing into the thick paste of earth and water. At 28, she'd seen enough towns to know they were all the same, suspicious of strangers, especially women traveling alone. But she'd run out of choices 3 towns back, and her money 2 towns before that. The driver handed down her trunk with a grunt, eager to be rid of his last passenger before seeking shelter himself. "Ma'am." He tipped his hat, water streaming from its brim. "Best find yourself somewhere dry." She nodded, pulling her cloak tighter. The trunk was heavy, filled with medical instruments, bottles of tincture, rolls of clean bandages, and the few dresses she owned. Everything a traveling nurse needed to survive. Everything she had left in the world. The inn stood across the street, its windows glowing yellow through the rain. Nora dragged her trunk through the mud, her skirts growing heavier with each step. The porch offered brief respite from the downpour. She knocked, then pushed open the door. Warmth and tobacco smoke hit her face. The common room fell silent. A dozen pairs of eyes turned to study her, mud-splattered, rain-soaked, alone. The innkeeper, a broad woman with iron-gray hair, looked up from wiping down the bar. "Help you." "I need a room for the night." Nora set down her bag, water pooling at her feet. "Just myself." The woman's expression hardened. "We're full up?" Nora glanced around the half-empty room. "I can pay." "Don't matter. We don't take women traveling alone after 9 o'clock. House rules." The innkeeper turned back to her cleaning. "Try the boarding house on Elm Street. Mrs. Pritchard might have space." "I just came from there. She sent me here." "Then I can't help you." The dismissal was final. Nora had heard it before in other towns, other inns. A woman alone after dark was either running from something or running to trouble. Either way, respectable establishments wanted no part of it. She picked up her bag, nodded to the watching men, and walked back into the storm. The old filling station sat abandoned at the edge of town, its pump long dry, its windows boarded, but the overhang remained intact, offering a few feet of shelter from the rain. Nora dragged her trunk under it and sank down against the wall, her wet clothes clinging cold against her skin. She'd slept rough before, in barns, in churches when the ministers were kind, once in a graveyard when nothing else presented itself. This wasn't the worst. At least she was out of the rain. Her hands found the medical bag in the darkness. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay her instrument scalpels, sutures, forceps, tools that had saved lives, delivered babies, stitched wounds, tools that meant nothing in a town that wouldn't give her shelter. The rain drummed harder on the tin roof. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed. Footsteps splashed through the mud, growing closer. Nora's hand moved to the small knife she kept in her boot. Another lesson learned on the road: kindness was rare, and it paid to be ready for its absence. A figure emerged from the rain, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the slight hitch of an old injury. He stopped at the edge of the overhang, water streaming from his hat. "Ma'am." She couldn't see his face in the darkness. "I'm not looking for trouble." "Didn't say you were." His voice was low, rough like gravel. "Saw you at Murphy's. Heard what she said. I'll be gone come morning." He was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped closer, and she could make out his features in the dim light weathered face, dark hair going gray at the temples, eyes that held their own shadows. "Name's Callum Wyatt. Got a forge down the street." He gestured behind him. "House attached. You can't stay here. I've slept in worse places." "Not what I meant." He pulled off his coat, held it out to her. "Storm's getting worse. Creek's rising. This whole area floods when it does." She didn't take the coat. "What do you want?" A fair question. Men didn't offer shelter without wanting something in return. Another lesson. Harder learned than most. Nothing. He set the coat on her trunk. Just offering a dry floor and a fire. You can bar the door from inside if it makes you feel safer. Why? He shifted his weight, favoring his left leg. Because I've been cold and wet with nowhere to go. Because Murphy's wrong to turn you out. Because... He stopped, shook his head. Does it matter? Thunder rolled across the plains. In its wake, she heard the creak. Closer now, angrier. I keep a knife, she said. Keep it handy, then. He turned to go, then looked back. Offer stands. Red door. 3 buildings past the smithy. Can't miss it. He walked away, leaving his coat behind. Nora sat in the darkness, weighing options that weren't really options at all. The creak grew louder. Water began seeping under the overhang, reaching for her boots. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not anymore. She stood, put on his coat. It smelled of leather and coal smoke, and dragged her trunk back into the storm. The red door was exactly where he'd said. She knocked, rain running down her neck. It opened immediately, as if he'd been waiting. Come in. The house was small, neat, Spartanly furnished. A fire crackled in the hearth. He took her trunk without asking, set it by the door. She stood dripping on his floor, uncertain. There's a room through there. He indicated a doorway. Was my sister's bed's made up? Lockworks. Your sister? Gone these 5 years? He moved to the fire, added another log. I'll heat some water. You can wash, get warm. There's clothes in the wardrobe might fit well enough to sleep in. She studied him in the firelight. The hitch in his walk was more pronounced now. An old war wound. Maybe, or an accident at the forge. His hands were scarred from years of working hot metal. When he turned, she saw kindness in his face, but also something else, a bone-deep weariness she recognized from her own mirror. I can pay you in the morning. Don't want your money. Then what? Sleep beside me. Just tonight? He said it quick, like ripping off a bandage. Then, seeing her stiffen, he raised a hand. I'll take the floor, just... He struggled for words. Just been a long time since there was anyone else under this roof. Gets too quiet sometimes. The request was strange, but his voice held no threat, only a loneliness that echoed her own. She'd heard worse propositions, faced actual danger. This was just a man who missed the sound of another person breathing in the darkness. All right. Relief flickered across his face. He busied himself with the fire, not looking at her. Water's in the kitchen. I'll bring it when it's hot. She found the room small but clean, with a narrow bed and a chest of drawers. Women's clothes hung in the wardrobe, preserved with cedar, his sister's, waiting for someone who would never wear them again. Nora changed out of her wet things, hanging them by the window. The dress she chose was plain wool, gray as winter sky. It fit well enough. When she emerged, he'd set up a makeshift bed by the fire blankets and a pillow on the floor. A pot of water steamed on the table beside soap and clean cloths. Thank you, she said. He nodded, not meeting her eyes. I'll be here if you need anything. She washed her face and hands, the warm water a blessing after the cold rain. He lay down by the fire, fully clothed, his back to her. She watched him for a moment, this strange, kind man, who asked nothing but presence, then went to the bedroom. The lock turned smooth and easy. She tested it twice before lying down. The bed was soft, the quilts warm. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside, for the first time in months, she felt safe. Through the door, she could hear him shifting on his hard bed, the fire crackling, the house settling around them. Good night, Mr. Wyatt, she called softly. A pause, then, good night, Miss Reed. Rest well. She closed her eyes, one hand on the knife under her pillow, the other clutched around the brass key. Tomorrow she would leave, find work, move on as she always did. But tonight, just tonight, she would sleep warm and dry while a stranger kept watch by the fire, asking nothing more than the comfort of not being alone. The rain continued through the night, but the creek never reached them, and if she heard him get up once to add wood to the fire, if she lay awake listening to his breathing level into sleep, if something in her chest loosened just a little at the sound, well, that was between her and the darkness. Come morning, things would be different. Come morning, she would leave. But morning was still hours away. Dawn came gray and quiet, the storm having blown itself out sometime in the night. Nora woke to unfamiliar stillness, no rain on the roof, no wind rattling windows, just the soft pop of embers in the next room and the distant crow of a rooster. She dressed quickly in her own clothes, now dry if still bearing mud stains. The brass key turned easily in the lock. She stepped into the main room to find it empty. The blankets by the fire folded neat. No sign of the man who'd slept there. Coffee scent led her to the kitchen. Callum stood at the stove, his back to her, working with the careful movements of someone long accustomed to solitude. A pot bubbled. Bread sat sliced on a board. Morning. He didn't turn around. Coffee's ready. Eggs if you want them. Just coffee, thank you. She sat at the small table, its surface marked by years of use. He poured 2 cups, set one before her, took the chair opposite. In daylight, she could see him better, the deep lines around his eyes, the gray threading through dark hair, hands marked by a lifetime of work. He moved stiffly, favoring that left leg. They drank in silence. The coffee was strong, bitter, perfect after a cold night. Through the window, Dust Hollow emerged from shadow wooden buildings, muddy streets, life resuming after the storm. I should go. She set down her cup. Thank you for... Eat first. He pushed the bread toward her. Long walk to anywhere from here. She took a slice. It was good bread, dense and dark. They ate without talking. 2 strangers sharing breakfast as if it were the most natural thing in the world. A knock rattled the door. Callum rose to answer it. An older woman stood on the porch, sharp-eyed and straight-backed, holding a covered basket. Morning, Callum. Her gaze went straight to Nora. Well, heard you had company. Morning, Mrs. Hutchins. He took the basket. Kind of you to come by. She studied Nora like a hawk sizing up prey. You're the woman from the stage yesterday, the one Murphy turned away. Yes, ma'am. Traveling alone. Yes. Running from a husband. No, ma'am, never had one to run from. Mrs. Hutchins sniffed. What's your business in Dust Hollow? Looking for work. I'm a nurse. A nurse? The woman's expression shifted slightly. Trained. 3 years at St. Mary's in Chicago. Been traveling since, helping where I can. Chicago. Another sniff, but less dismissive. My grandson's been poorly. Fever comes and goes. Doc Morrison says it's just childhood ailments. But, she stopped, glanced at Callum. She's staying. That's her business, he said quietly. Mrs. Hutchins turned back to Nora. If you're what you say, I might have work, but I'll be checking those credentials. We don't need another snake oil seller in this town. I have letters of reference, from doctors, patients I've helped. Bring them by this afternoon. White House with green shutters, 2 streets over. She gave Callum a long look. You know what people will say. Let them say it. She left without goodbye. Callum closed the door, set the basket on the table. Inside were preserves, pickled vegetables, a loaf of fresh bread. She means well, he said, just protective of the town. She's right to be careful. Nora had met too many charlatans on the road, people claiming skills they didn't possess. I should go. Find lodging before... Mrs. Pritchard won't take you. Neither will Murphy. As you saw, there's a room above the mercantile, but Thompson only rents to men. He paused. You could stay here. The offer hung between them. In daylight, it seemed more complicated than it had in the storm. People will talk, like she said. They talk anyway. He began unpacking the basket. Room's empty. Seems foolish. You sleeping rough when there's a bed going unused. What do you want for rent? Don't want rent. He set jars on the shelf with methodical precision. Maybe help with meals sometimes. Been eating my own cooking too long. She watched him work, this strange, quiet man who offered shelter without conditions. There had to be a catch. There always was. Why? He stopped, hand still on a jar of preserves. You asked that last night too. You didn't really answer. A long pause. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. Place gets too quiet, that's all. Not all, she thought, but didn't press. Everyone had their ghosts. 1 week, she heard herself say, until I find something else. He nodded, resumed his unpacking. Fair enough. She helped him put away the rest of Mrs. Hutchins's offerings, learning where things belonged in his ordered kitchen. They worked without speaking, finding an easy rhythm. When finished, he reached for his coat. Forge needs opening. You'll want to get your things settled. He paused at the door. Town's small. Everyone knows everyone's business. Just be ready for that. He left before she could respond. Through the window, she watched him walk down the street, that distinctive hitching gait marking his progress. People nodded as he passed. A few glanced toward his house, curiosity plain on their faces. Nora unpacked slowly, hanging her few dresses in the wardrobe alongside those of a dead woman. Her medical supplies she arranged on the dresser bottles and instruments and the leather roll containing her surgical tools. Everything she needed to practice her trade, if the town would let her. By afternoon, she'd made the room her own. The clothes were practical 2 work dresses, one for Sundays, a heavy cloak for winter, her mother's Bible, though she rarely opened it, a photograph of her graduating class at St. Mary's, faces bright with hope for futures that had turned out different than any of them expected. She gathered her references and went to find Mrs. Hutchins. The White House with green shutters sat on a well-tended lot. Chickens pecked in the side yard. A garden showed signs of careful cultivation. Mrs. Hutchins answered before Nora could knock. Punctual? Good. She took the letters, gesturing Nora inside. Sit. I'll read these properly. The parlor was spotless, doilies on every surface, photographs arranged on the mantel. Mrs. Hutchins read each letter slowly, lips moving slightly. Finally, she looked up. A doctor, Patterson, speaks highly of you. Says you saved a child when he'd given up hope. The doctor did the saving. I just assisted. Modesty? A thin smile. Or careful words? Truth, ma'am. I know what I can do and what I can't. Mrs. Hutchins set aside the letters. My grandson's through here. The boy lay in a small room off the kitchen, perhaps 7 years old, pale and thin. His breathing was labored, eyes too bright. Nora felt his forehead, checked his pulse, examined his throat. How long has he been like this? 2 weeks, getting worse. Doc Morrison left a tonic, but the older woman's composure cracked slightly. He's all I have left. My daughter died birthing him. His father took fever last winter. Nora opened the boy's mouth gently, angled him toward the light. The telltale white patches confirmed her suspicion. It's thrush, complicated by fever, common in children, but it needs different treatment than what Doc Morrison prescribed. She turned to Mrs. Hutchins. I can help, but it'll take several days of careful nursing. I'll need to make a different medicine. Do it. Nora spent the next 3 hours treating the boy, cleaning the infection, preparing a gentian violet solution, showing Mrs. Hutchins how to apply it. The child whimpered but didn't fight, too weak for protest. He should improve by tomorrow. I'll come back in the morning to check. She packed her supplies. No solid food until the patch is clear. Broth and cooled boiled water only. Mrs. Hutchins walked her to the door. What do I owe you? We'll discuss that when he's well. You're staying at Callum's. It wasn't a question. Nora nodded. He's a good man. Broken, but good. The older woman studied her. His intended died 5 years back. Consumption. He nursed her through the end. Wouldn't leave her side. Hasn't been the same since. So that was the sister whose clothes hung in the wardrobe. Not a sister at all, but something more. Nora filed this information away. Thank you for trusting me with your grandson. Don't thank me yet. If that boy doesn't improve, you'll be on the next stage out of town. References or no. But her tone held less threat than worry. Walking back, Nora noticed how people watched her, some curious, others suspicious. A woman alone was one thing. A woman staying with a reclusive blacksmith was another. She kept her head high, meeting their gazes when necessary. The forge rang with hammer blows. She paused, watching Callum work through the open doors. He bent over the anvil, shaping what looked like horseshoes, each strike precise despite his injured leg. Sweat darkened his shirt. The furnace cast orange light across his concentrated face. He sensed her presence, looked up. How'd it go? She's letting me treat her grandson. That's something. He set down his hammer. Means she's vouching for you. Her word carries weight here. She told me about your sister, the one whose room I'm using. His face closed off. Did she... I'm sorry. I thought the clothes... Not your fault. He turned back to his work. Margaret, her name was Margaret, and she wasn't my sister. The hammer rang against metal, ending the conversation. Nora continued to the house, understanding now the weight of his loneliness, the echo of footsteps in empty rooms. That night, they ate soup she'd made from vegetables in his root cellar. He'd returned late from the forge, washing at the pump outside before coming in. They sat at the familiar table, sharing bread in silence. The boy will be fine, she said eventually. I've seen this before. Children recover quickly with proper care. He nodded. Mrs. Hutchins lost too much already. Good you could help. She said Margaret had consumption. His spoon stilled. She did. I've treated that too. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not. It's cruel how it takes people slow. Inevitable. Yes, single word, weighted with memory. They finished eating. She cleared the dishes while he banked the fire. The domestic rhythm felt both foreign and familiar, two people sharing space. Careful not to intrude on each other's grief. Later, in the borrowed room, Nora lay awake thinking about Margaret's clothes still hanging in the wardrobe. About a man who couldn't bear to pack them away. About Mrs. Hutchins' words broken but good. Through the wall, she heard him moving about, preparing for another night on the floor by the fire. She almost called out, almost offered to take her turn on the hard boards. But something held her back. He'd made his choice. Strange as it was, all he wanted was the sound of another person breathing in the darkness, the knowledge that the house wasn't empty. She could give him that much, for now. The week stretched ahead, full of uncertainty. But tonight, she had a roof overhead, work to do tomorrow, and the quiet companionship of someone who understood that sometimes the worst loneliness came from sleeping beside an empty space where love used to be. The week turned into a month, and the month into a season. Nora's temporary arrangement at Callum's house settled into routine, neither of them speaking of when it might end. She'd tried twice to find other lodging, but Mrs. Pritchard claimed to be full, and Murphy maintained her policy against unmarried women. The room above the mercantile remained mysteriously unavailable. Word of her healing skills spread through Dust Hollow like water finding its level. Mrs. Hutchins' grandson recovered completely. and the older woman made sure everyone knew who'd cured him when Doc Morrison's tonic had failed. Soon, others came seeking help. There was Sarah Whitley, whose baby wouldn't take milk. Nora showed her different holds, mixed a mild fennel tea for the infant's stomach. The Carver twins came down with croup. She spent 2 nights in their home, holding them over steaming basins of water mixed with camphor. Old Sam Chen, who ran the laundry, brought his wife when her arthritis flared. Nora couldn't cure that, but she showed them exercises and wrapped the swollen joints with flannel soaked in wintergreen oil. She took payment when offered a chicken here, preserved peaches there, sometimes actual money, but more often, she worked for trade or promise a future payment. Times were hard in Dust Hollow. The cattle drives had moved to other trails, taking prosperity with them. Her days developed their own rhythm. Mornings, she'd make coffee while Callum ate bread and preserves, both of them moving around the small kitchen with practiced care not to collide. He'd leave for the forge. She'd make her rounds checking on patients, treating new ailments, teaching mothers how to break fevers and clean wounds. But it was the mending that became her unexpected trademark. It started with Thomas Garrett, age 9, who'd been born unable to speak. His mother brought him to Nora hoping for a miracle cure she couldn't provide. The boy sat silent on the examination chair, eyes bright with intelligence no one seemed to see. "There's nothing wrong with his throat or tongue," Nora told Mrs. Garrett gently. "Sometimes children just don't speak." The woman's face fell. Behind her, Thomas made rapid gestures with his hands, clearly trying to communicate something urgent. "What's he doing?" Nora asked. "Oh, that. He's always waving his hands about. Peculiar child." Mrs. Garrett sounded tired, defeated. Nora knelt before the boy. "Show me again." He repeated the gestures, pointing to himself, then making a circling motion, then pointing outside. She copied him. His face lit up. "I think he's trying to tell us something. Has he always done this?" "Since he was small, my husband says to ignore it, but—" "Don't ignore it." Nora made a gesture, hand flat, moving down. Thomas nodded vigorously. "He's creating his own language. I've read about this. There are schools back east where they teach hand-talking to deaf children. He's not deaf. He can hear perfectly well. But he can't speak. This might be his way." She turned to Thomas. "Would you teach me?" The boy's smile could have lit the whole room. Nora began visiting the Garretts twice a week. Without proper knowledge of the established sign language, she and Thomas created their own simple system. Within a month, he could communicate basic needs: hungry, tired, happy, sad. His first full sentence, spelled out laboriously, was, "Thank you for seeing me." "Mrs." Garrett wept when Nora translated. Then there was Ezra Hoffman's torn coat. The old bachelor brought it to her instead of the seamstress, claiming he couldn't afford Mrs. Palmer's prices. Nora mended it with tiny, even stitches her mother had taught her before life got complicated, Ezra told others. Soon she was hemming pants, patching shirts, darning socks, always for those who couldn't afford the regular seamstress, always with the same careful attention she gave to suturing wounds. "You're mending more than clothes," Callum observed one evening, watching her work on a pile of clothing by lamplight. "People need to feel cared for. Sometimes that's a medicine. Sometimes it's fixing a favorite shirt." She tied off a thread. "Mrs. Palmer doesn't mind. These folks couldn't pay her anyway." He added another log to the fire. Margaret used to say something similar, about how fixing things was a kind of love. It was the first time he'd volunteered her name since that day at the forge. Nora kept her eyes on her stitching. "She sounds wise." She was. He settled into his chair. "Too wise for this place. Always talking about going to San Francisco, seeing the ocean. I promised we'd go after we married." The needle paused. "You didn't marry?" "Planned to." Then she started coughing. Seemed like nothing at first. He stared into the fire. By the time Doc Morrison knew what it was, she was too weak to travel. I asked her to marry me anyway. She said no, didn't want me tied to a dying woman. So you cared for her anyway? Every day, 14 months. His voice was steady, but his hands gripped the chair arms. Folks talked then too. Unmarried woman in my house. But what did their opinions matter against her need? Nora understood then why he'd taken her in that night. Why he asked nothing but presence. He was repaying a debt to the universe, offering someone else the shelter he'd given Margaret. I'm not her, she said quietly. I know. He stood abruptly. Didn't mean to burden you with old sorrows. He retreated to his makeshift bed by the fire. She heard him settling for the night, adding distance between them with blankets and floorboards. But something had shifted. The ghost of Margaret no longer stood quite so solid between them. Days passed. Nora treated fevers and fears, mended bodies and clothes, slowly earning her place in Dust Hollow's careful community. She and Thomas developed more signs. He taught other children, creating a small group who could communicate with their hands. Parents initially resisted, but when Thomas wrote his first word, mother, on a slate, Nora provided. Resistance crumbled. The packages began appearing after the first freeze of November. She'd returned from rounds to find them on the porch, a bundle of firewood, dried beans in a cloth sack, a ham wrapped in brown paper. Never a note, never a sign of who left them. She asked Callum, but he claimed ignorance. Maybe folks paying debts, he suggested, though she noticed he never seemed surprised by the offerings. She suspected otherwise, but didn't press. He had his ways of caring. Indirect as winter light, the firewood always appeared before cold snaps. The food came when her patient visits ran late and she missed markets. Someone was paying attention. One afternoon, she returned to find not packages but Callum himself on the porch, favoring his bad leg more than usual. What happened? Nothing, just acts up sometimes. But sweat beaded his forehead despite the cold. She helped him inside, made him sit. The leg was swollen at the knee, hot to touch. An old injury, badly healed, inflamed by overwork. When did this happen? Years back. Cannon wheel rolled over it at Pecos Valley. He tried to pull away. It's fine. It's not fine. She fetched her supplies. You've been compensating, making the other leg work harder. That's why your whole gait is affected. She worked on the swollen joint, massaging carefully, applying a poultice of arnica and willow bark. He sat rigid at first, unaccustomed to being tended. Gradually, as the pain eased, he relaxed. Why didn't you say something sooner? Didn't seem necessary. He watched her work. Manage this long? Managing isn't living. She wrapped the knee carefully. This needs regular treatment, heat, exercises, proper rest. Don't have time for rest. Make time. She sat back. I've seen too many people crippled because they ignored injuries until it was too late. You're young still. This can be helped if you let it. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then Margaret tried to tell me the same thing. I was too stubborn to listen. Are you still... A ghost of a smile. Maybe less than I was. She began treating his leg every evening, heat, massage, exercises to strengthen the damaged muscles. He submitted with poor grace at first, then with growing acceptance as the pain lessened. She caught him once doing the exercises on his own, face determined. Better? She asked. Some. He flexed the knee experimentally. Doesn't catch like it used to. Small victories. She was teaching Thomas new words, showing mothers how to prevent winter croup, slowly healing an old soldier's pride along with his leg. And someone, surely Callum, though he'd never admit it, kept leaving gifts of sustenance on the porch. She wasn't Margaret. He wasn't asking her to be, but something was building between them. Quiet as snow accumulation, patient as her small stitches mending torn cloth. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it. Growing in the space between what was lost and what might still be found. One night, she found him standing at Margaret's wardrobe, door open, staring at the preserved clothes. I should pack these away, he said without turning. It's been 5 years. Only when you're ready. Will I ever be? She moved to stand beside him. Not touching, just present. Maybe readiness isn't the point. Maybe you just choose a day and do it. He closed the wardrobe door carefully. Not today. No, not today. They stood together in the lamplight, surrounded by the quiet house and the weight of old griefs slowly lifting. Outside, snow began to fall, covering Dust Hollow in temporary grace. Tomorrow there would be sick to tend, clothes to mend, a boy to teach new words with dancing hands. But tonight, they simply stood together, learning the shape of a companionship that asked nothing but presence, offered nothing but patience, and grew stronger with each small act of care. The rain returned in late November, turning the streets to mud and driving everyone indoors. Nora had spent the day tending to the Brennan family, all 5 children down with cough, and returned to find the house empty, the forge cold. Unusual for Callum to close early. She found him in the barn, sitting on an overturned crate, staring at something in his hands. An old military jacket, Union blue faded to gray, one sleeve torn. Callum. He didn't startle, just kept studying the jacket. Found this in the back of the tack room. Thought I'd burned it years ago. She entered slowly, sat on a hay bale nearby. The barn smelled of leather and old straw, rain drumming on the roof, from Pecos Valley. Before that, Antietam, Chancellorsville. He fingered the torn sleeve. Wore it when I asked Margaret's father for permission to court her. He said no, what did a broken soldier have to offer, but she said yes anyway. She saw who you were, not what you'd been through. Maybe, he looked up then, eyes distant. You ever wonder if we get more than one chance at happiness? I mean, the question hung between them like dust motes in lantern light. Nora thought of her own ghosts, not war, but betrayal that cut just as deep. I was engaged once, she heard herself say. Back in Chicago, Charles Weatherby, a doctor at the hospital. Handsome, charming, from a good family. Everything a woman was supposed to want. Callum waited, patient as always. Caught him with my sister, my younger sister, Rose. The words came easier than expected. In our father's study, during my birthday party, they didn't even lock the door. What did you do? Walked away. Packed that night, left Chicago the next morning. Broke my parents' hearts, they'd announced the engagement in the papers. The scandal. She shrugged. Rose married him 3 months later. They have 2 children now. Mother writes sometimes, asking when I'll forgive. Have you? I've tried, but trust. Once broken. She gestured at the jacket. Like that sleeve. You can mend it, but the tear always shows. He nodded slowly. She died waiting. The words fell like stones into still water. Nora said nothing, sensing the weight of confession. I never came back. His voice roughened. That's what I wrote Margaret, when my unit mustered out. That I was done with Illinois, done with everything that reminded me of what I'd seen. Told her not to wait, but she did. 3 years. She waited. Her father finally wrote, told me she was sick, begged me to come home. And you came. Too late for anything but watching her die. He folded the jacket carefully. She never asked why I stayed away. Never blamed me, just said she was glad I came at the end. Outside, the rain intensified. Thunder rolled across the prairie, and lightning illuminated the barn's interior in stark flashes. In that strange, storm-lit space, 2 people sat with their wounds exposed, finding odd comfort in shared damage. Do you think they knew? Nora asked. Charles and Rose, do you think they knew what it would cost? Does it matter? She considered this. No, I suppose it doesn't. I knew what staying away cost. Knew it every day for 3 years. He stood, hanging the jacket on a nail. Sometimes we make choices that break us. Then we live with the breaking. Is that what we're doing, living with being broken? He turned to her, and in the lamplight, she saw something shift in his face. Maybe we're learning that broken things can still be useful, just different than before. They walked back to the house together, rain soaking through their clothes. Inside, Nora built up the fire while Callum made coffee. They worked without speaking, the ease of routine covering the raw places they'd exposed. Later, as she mended a child's dress by lamplight, he spoke again. "I'm glad you're here." Simple words, but she heard the weight beneath them. "So am I. Not just for the house, for," he gestured vaguely, "for being someone who understands." She set down her sewing. "Callum, I know. You're not her. I'm not him." He met her eyes. "But maybe that's better. Maybe knowing the worst that can happen means we can't disappoint each other the same way." A dangerous thought. Hope was always dangerous for people like them, who'd learned the cost of trust. But something in his face weathered, scarred. Honest made her consider it. "The worst already happened," she said slowly. "To both of us." "Yes. So what comes next can't be worse. Only different." He smiled then, crooked but real. "Good different or bad different remains to be seen." She picked up her sewing again. "I suppose we'll find out." The storm continued through the night. She heard him moving about, checking windows, adding wood to the fire. Once, she thought she heard him pause outside her door, but no knock came, just the soft footsteps moving away, giving her the space she'd grown accustomed to. In the morning, the rain had stopped. Weak sunlight filtered through clouds, revealing a world washed clean. Callum had already left for the forge when she rose, but coffee waited on the stove, still warm. Beside it, a note in his careful hand. "Mrs. Chen needs checking. Her arthritis will be bad after the storm." She smiled at his thoughtfulness. He paid attention to weather, to need, to the small kindnesses that made hard lives bearable. It had been months since that first night, when he'd offered shelter to a stranger. Now she couldn't imagine the house without his quiet presence. Couldn't imagine her days without their careful dance of companionship. At the Chen laundry, she found the elderly woman struggling with swollen hands. Her husband tried to help, but his own joints suffered in the damp. Nora worked on them both, massaging in the wintergreen oil, showing their granddaughter how to help when she wasn't there. "You're a blessing, Miss Reed," Mrs. Chen said in her careful English. Mr. Callum chose well. "We're not, I'm just renting a room." The old woman smiled. "Of course, just renting." But her knowing look followed Nora through the day as she made her rounds. Others gave similar smiles, similar assumptions. She'd given up correcting them. Let people think what they would. The truth was both simpler and more complicated than their gossip imagined. That evening, she returned to find Callum waiting on the porch despite his bad leg. His face was grave. "What's wrong?" A letter came. He held out an envelope. "From Chicago." Her sister's handwriting. Nora's hands trembled as she opened it. "Nora," it read. "Father is dying. Please come home. Whatever happened between us, he needs to see you. Charles and I—" She stopped reading, crumpled the paper. "Bad news." "My father, Rose says he's dying." She laughed bitterly. "Asks me to come home, as if I still have a home there." Callum was quiet. Then, "You should go." "Why? So they can all pretend the scandal never happened, so Rose can play the devoted sister at his bedside while her husband—" She stopped, anger choking the words. "So you don't spend the rest of your life wondering if you should have—" His voice was gentle. "Trust me on this. The weight of staying away doesn't lessen with time." She looked at him, this man who understood the cost of absence, who'd carried that weight for years. "I can't face them." "You can. You're stronger than you know." He paused. "I'll go with you, if it helps. To the station. I mean, see you off proper. And if I don't come back, if they convince me to stay, make peace for appearances." Something flickered in his eyes, fear loss quickly hidden. Then Dust Hollow loses a fine healer, but that's your choice to make. She stood abruptly, letter clutched in her hand. Inside the house, she paced the small room that had become home. Margaret's dresses still hung in the wardrobe, but her own clothes hung beside them now. Her medical bag sat on the dresser next to bottles of Callum's headache powder. Their lives had intertwined so gradually she hadn't noticed until faced with leaving. Through the window, she saw him at the forge, working late as always. The ring of his hammer carried on the cold air steady, reliable, enduring, like the man himself. She'd run from Chicago, from betrayal and shame, found refuge in this unlikely place with this damaged man who asked nothing but companionship. Now the past called her back, and she had to choose face what she'd fled or lose her father forever. But underneath that choice lay another return to Dust Hollow, or let this fragile, unnamed thing between her and Callum fade into might have been. She smoothed out the letter, read it again. Rose's desperation bled through the formal words. Whatever else her sister was, she loved their father. That hadn't changed. Tomorrow, she'd make her decision. Tonight, she had patience to check, supper to make, and a quiet evening of companionship with a man who understood that some wounds never fully healed, you just learned to walk despite the limp. The lamp burned low as she worked on her mending. Callum returned, moving stiffly from the cold. They ate in comfortable silence, sharing the day's small events. Neither mentioned the letter or the choice it demanded. But when she bid him good night, he caught her hand briefly. Whatever you decide, you've made a difference here. That matters. She squeezed back, then let go. In her room, she lay awake thinking of two cities, one that had shaped her, one that had sheltered her. Of two men, one who'd broken her trust, one who'd slowly earned it. Of sisters and fathers and the complicated weight of family. Most of all, she thought of Callum's words, broken things could still be useful, just different than before. Perhaps that was true of people as well as objects. Perhaps the breaking wasn't the end, but a transformation, like metal in the forge, heated, hammered, reshaped into something stronger. Time would tell. The smell hit her first smoke thick and acrid, cutting through the December cold. Nora jolted awake to the sound of shouting, bells clanging, horses neighing in panic. Orange light danced on her bedroom wall. Fire at the Widow Malone's. She threw on her cloak over her nightgown, grabbed her medical bag, and ran barefoot into the street. Half of Dust Hollow seemed to be there already, forming bucket brigades, shouting orders. The widow's house was fully engulfed, flames licking at the night sky. My Mary's still inside. Mrs. Malone stood in her neighbor's arms, fighting to break free. Her 7-year-old daughter was nowhere to be seen. Nora didn't think. She dropped her bag, soaked her cloak in the horse trough, and ran toward the burning house. Heat hit her like a physical blow. Someone shouted her name, Callum's voice, but she was already through the door. Smoke blinded her instantly. She dropped to her knees, crawling forward, calling Mary's name. The wet cloak helped, but barely. Her lungs burned. Somewhere above, timber cracked ominously. A whimper led her to the stairs. Mary huddled there, too terrified to move. Nora grabbed her, wrapped the child in the damp cloak, and turned back. But the doorway she'd entered through was now a wall of flame. The window. She felt along the wall, found glass, grabbed a chair and smashed it out. Fresh air rushed in, feeding the fire. No time to hesitate. She lifted Mary through, heard someone catch her, then hauled herself after. Hands pulled her clear just as the roof began to collapse. She lay on the frozen ground, coughing, retching, while someone poured water over her singed hair and clothes. Mary's crying told her the child lived. "The dog misses," Malone screamed. "Caesar's still in there!" "Let it go," someone said, but a figure was already running toward the inferno. Callum. Of course it was Callum, with his damn need to save everything. No! Nora tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't work. He disappeared into what had been the kitchen door. For endless seconds, nothing. The crowd held its breath. Then he stumbled out, a bundle of singed fur in his arms, just as the entire structure groaned and collapsed inward. A burning beam caught him across the shoulder, knocking him down. Men rushed forward, dragging him clear, beating out the flames on his shirt. The dog wiggled free, miraculously alive, and limped to its mistress. Nora crawled to where Callum lay. His left shoulder and cheek were badly burned, shirt charred to the skin in places. He was conscious but barely, eyes glazed with pain. "Get him to his house," she ordered, voice raw from smoke. "Now?" They carried him on a door torn from someone's barn. Nora walked alongside, one hand on his unburned arm, fury and fear warring in her chest. Damn fool man, risking himself for a dog. Damn heroic, stubborn, selfless fool. At the house, she took charge. Boil water, clean cloths. Someone ride for Doc Morrison. Doc's in Millerville. Mrs. Hutchins said, "Won't be back for 2 days." "Then I'll manage." She began cutting away his ruined shirt, assessing the damage. 2nd-degree burns across his shoulder and back. 1st-degree on his face, painful but survivable if kept clean. For 3 days, she barely left his side. The burns required constant attention cleaning, applying honey and calendula poultices, watching for infection. He drifted in and out of consciousness, fever spiking and dropping. She spooned broth between his lips, changed bandages, held his hand when pain made him thrash. "Margaret?" He called once, delirious. "I'm sorry, should have come home sooner." "Shh," Nora soothed. "Rest now?" On the 2nd night, his fever broke. He woke clear-headed, finding her slumped in the chair beside his bed. "You're here," he said, voice hoarse. "Where else would I be?" She checked his bandages, not meeting his eyes. "That was foolish, going back for a dog." "You went in for Mary." "That's different. She's a child." Mrs. Malone lost her husband last year. That dog is all Mary has left of him." He tried to shift, winced. "Seemed worth the risk." "You could have died." "So could you." They glared at each other, both too stubborn to yield. Then Nora's composure cracked. "Don't you understand? I couldn't bear—" She stopped, appalled at what she'd almost said. His good hand found hers. "I'm sorry, didn't mean to scare you." She should pull away, should maintain the careful distance they'd cultivated. Instead, she held on. "You did scare me, when I saw you run in there. I thought—" She swallowed hard. "I thought I was going to lose you." "Take more than a burning beam to get rid of me. This isn't funny. Callum—" "I know." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But I'm all right. Thanks to you." She did pull away then, busying herself with fresh bandages. The intimacy of the moment was too much, too revealing. They'd built their companionship on careful boundaries. His injury had shattered those, leaving her raw and exposed. On the 3rd day, she finally left the house to check on other patients. The town treated her like a hero saving little Mary, nursing Callum through his injuries. She deflected their praise, uncomfortable with the attention. At the mercantile, she found supplies waiting. "Already paid for," Thompson said. "Folks wanted to help, seeing as how you've been helping everyone else." Similar scenes played out across town. Free meals at the boarding house, fabric for new clothes to replace her smoke-damaged dress, small gifts left at the door. Dust Hollow was claiming her as one of their own. When she returned, she found Callum sitting up, attempting to dress himself one-handed. "You should be resting." "Been resting 3 days. Forge won't run itself." "You can't work with those burns." "Watch me." They stared at each other. Stubborn meeting. Stubborn. Finally. She sighed. "At least let me help with your shirt." She eased the garment over his bandages, trying not to notice the lean strength of him. the way his breath caught when she touched unmarked skin. This was dangerous territory. There, she stepped back quickly. But if you tear those burns open at the forge, I won't be sympathetic. He caught her wrist as she turned away. Nora, what you said before, about not bearing to lose me. I was tired, worried. Don't read anything into it. I won't, if you don't want me to. He released her. But just so we're clear, when I saw you run into that fire, I felt the same. The thought of losing you. He shook his head. Made me realize some things. What things? That this arrangement of ours has become more than convenience. At least for me. He met her eyes steadily. I won't press you. Won't change anything unless you want it changed. But you should know where I stand. She fled to the kitchen, hands shaking as she prepared tea neither of them wanted. His words echoed in her mind, threatening the safe structure they'd built. She'd come to Dust Hollow running from one disaster of the heart. She couldn't survive another. But that night, as she listened to him moving carefully about the house, she acknowledged what fear had revealed. Somewhere between that first storm and this fire, Callum Wyatt had become essential to her, not just as a provider of shelter or companion in loneliness, but as himself stubborn, kind, brave to the point of foolishness. She loved him. The realization was terrifying. For the next week, they danced around this new awareness. She tended his burns with professional detachment. He submitted to her care without complaint. They took meals together, shared evening conversations, maintained all their careful routines. But underneath ran a current of unspoken possibility. The burns healed well, leaving scars but no lasting damage. Callum returned to the forge, working shorter hours at Nora's insistence. Life in Dust Hollow continued, babies born, elders passing, Thomas Garrett learning new words to share with eager hands. Mrs. Malone and Mary moved in with relatives, the dog Caesar a constant shadow. The widow sought Nora out one afternoon, tears in her eyes. You saved my daughter. I can never repay that. No payment needed. I'm just glad she's safe. And Mr. Callum saved Caesar. Mary would have been heartbroken to lose him too. She pressed a small wrapped package into Nora's hands. It's not much, but I wanted you to have this. Inside was a silver locket, tarnished with age. I can't accept. It was my mother's. She was a healer too, in the old country. Used herbs and prayers and whatever else might help. Mrs. Malone smiled through her tears. She would have liked you. Please, take it. That night, Nora showed Callum the locket. He helped her fasten the clasp, his fingers careful against her neck. It suits you, he said quietly. I didn't earn it. Anyone would have done the same. No. His hands rested briefly on her shoulders. Not everyone runs toward the fire. Most run away. She turned to face him, seeing her own heart reflected in his eyes. They stood there, balanced on the edge of change, both afraid to take the next step. Finally, Callum stepped back. I should bank the fire. Getting cold. Yes, she agreed, though the room felt too warm. I should check my supplies. Running low on several things. They parted, retreating to safe activities, but something had shifted, fundamental as stone settling into new foundations. The careful distance they'd maintained was dissolving, leaving them exposed to possibilities that thrilled and terrified in equal measure. Outside, snow began to fall, soft as benediction. The widow's locket lay warm against Nora's throat, a reminder that healing took many forms, sometimes herbs and sutures, sometimes the simple courage to run toward what others fled from. She thought of the letter from Chicago, still unanswered in her drawer. Her father might be dying, her sister begging for reconciliation, but here in Dust Hollow, she'd found something worth staying for a man who understood brokenness and beauty, a town that needed her skills, a life rebuilt from ashes. Tomorrow, she would make her choice about Chicago. Tonight, she listened to Callum moving about in the next room, both of them learning that love, like burns, left scars that marked you forever, evidence of survival, proof of courage, reminders that some things were worth the fire. The whispers started at the general store, carried on the wind like seeds finding fertile ground. Nora heard them while selecting flour, two women behind the fabric bolts. Voices pitched to Carrie. Living there all these months without proper arrangement. What kind of woman does that? Same kind that runs into burning buildings, I suppose. No sense of propriety. Mark my words. She's got her hooks in him good. Poor Callum, still grieving Margaret. And along comes this city woman. Nora set down the flour with careful control, selected her purchases, and paid Thompson without acknowledging what she'd heard. But her hands trembled as she walked home. More whispers followed throughout the week. At the well, women fell silent when she approached. Men tipped their hats but wouldn't meet her eyes. Even patients seemed uncomfortable, accepting her care while radiating disapproval. Only Mrs. Hutchins spoke directly. People are talking. People always talk. Nora was checking young Timothy's recovered throat, pleased to see the infection fully cleared. This is different. Murphy's stirring them up, saying it's indecent, that you're taking advantage of Callum's grief. I pay rent, I cook and keep house in exchange for lower rates. Everything's proper. Mrs. Hutchins snorted. Girl, nothing's proper about a young woman living with an unmarried man. Whatever the arrangement, you know that well as I do. That evening, Nora found Callum at the kitchen table, jaw tight with suppressed anger. A crumpled paper lay before him. What's wrong? He pushed the paper toward her. A note, unsigned. Send her away before she ruins you like she ruined herself. When did this come? Found it nailed to the forge door. His hands clenched. Cowards didn't even sign it. She sank into her chair. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should go. Don't! The word came sharp as a hammer strike. Don't let them drive you out. Your reputation was ruined the day I came back from the war broken. They whispered then, too, about how I wasn't fit for Margaret, how I'd never amount to anything. He stood abruptly. I stopped caring what they thought years ago. But this is different. This affects your business, your standing. My business is fine. People need horseshoes and tools whether they approve of my living arrangements or not. He paced to the window. What bothers me is what they're saying about you, that you're somehow improper. Aren't I by their standards? He turned to face her. By their standards. You should have stayed in Chicago, married badly, pretended to be happy. Instead, you chose freedom. That scares them. A knock interrupted. Callum opened the door to find Pastor Williams, thin and nervous, hat clutched in his hands. Evening, Callum, Miss Reed. He entered reluctantly. I've come on behalf of the church board. Spit it out, Paul. The pastor flushed. There's been concern about the appearance of sin, living together without benefit of marriage. We're not living together. Nora's voice was steady. I rent a room. We share meals for convenience. Nothing improper has occurred. I believe you, but perception matters as much as truth in a small town. The board feels, that is, they've asked me to suggest. He swallowed hard. Either marry or separate, for the good of the community. Silence fell like a stone into deep water. Callum's face had gone dangerously still. Get out, he said quietly. Callum, please understand. Get out. The pastor fled. Callum slammed the door hard enough to rattle windows, then stood with his back to her, shoulders rigid. I'm sorry, Nora whispered. For what? For existing, for being unmarried. He spun to face her. For saving lives and mending clothes and teaching a mute boy to speak with his hands. For bringing this trouble to your door. The only trouble is narrow minds and wagging tongues. He crossed to her, knelt beside her chair. Don't let them make you feel ashamed. You've done nothing wrong. Haven't I? The words came out broken. Sometimes I watch you at the forge, or making coffee in the morning, and I think things I shouldn't, feel things that prove they're right about me being improper. His breath caught. Nora! And then I hate myself for it, because you've been nothing but kind. And here I am, proving them right that I'm just another woman trying to trap. He kissed her, not passionate or demanding, just a gentle press of lips that stopped her spiral of words. When he pulled back, his eyes were very serious. If anyone's been trapped, it's me, by your kindness and your courage and the way you hum when you're mending, by how you remember exactly how I take my coffee and notice when my leg aches before I do. He cupped her face gently. I've been trapped since the night you knocked on my door in the rain, but it's a trap I walked into willingly. The town can hang itself. What matters is what we want. What do you want? You. However, you'll have me. As landlord, as friend, as more if you're willing. He stood, stepped back. But only if you want it too. Not because of gossip or pressure, but because it's right between us. She rose, crossed to him. That night of the fire, when I thought I might lose you, everything became clear. All my careful distances, my rules about not caring again, none of it mattered against the thought of you gone. Then we'll face them together. How they want us, married or separated, I won't be forced into marriage by gossip. But I won't leave. Not anymore. He was quiet, thinking. Then, there's another option. The next morning, Nora dressed with care and walked to the mercantile. The usual whispers followed. But she held her head high. At Thompson's counter, she made her purchases, then turned to address the store. I understand there's been talk about my living arrangements. Her voice carried clear. Let me clarify. I am a boarder in Mr. Wyatt's house, paying fair rent. I am also a healer in this town, available to anyone who needs care regardless of what they think of my choices. Doesn't change facts, Murphy said from near the stove. Unmarried woman, unmarried man. Same roof, it ain't decent. What's indecent? Callum's voice came from the doorway. Is turning away a woman in a storm because she's alone. What's indecent is gossiping about someone who's done nothing but help this town. He walked to Nora's side. Miss Reed is my tenant and my business partner. We're opening a joint practice, healing and smithing, like the sign says. Professional arrangement. Nothing more or less. Still living under same roof, someone muttered. Yes, Nora said calmly, because Mrs. Pritchard still claims to have no rooms, and Murphy's Inn still refuses unmarried women. Would you prefer I sleep in the street to satisfy your propriety? Could solve it easy enough, Murphy said. Marry the man or move on. I'll marry when I choose, who I choose, for reasons that have nothing to do with your comfort. She gathered her purchases. In the meantime, I'll continue treating anyone who needs help. Your choice whether to accept it. They left together, heads high, but Nora felt the weight of eyes following, the judgment settling like ash on her shoulders. That afternoon, she treated the Brennan children for ear infections while their mother watched with pursed lips. She delivered medicines to elderly Mr. Foster, who thanked her while avoiding eye contact. Each interaction carried the taint of disapproval. Maybe I should go, she told Callum that evening. Not forever, just until talk dies down. Will it, or will they just say you ran because the accusations were true? He shook his head. Running doesn't solve this. Then what does... A knock interrupted Mrs. Chen stood at the door with several other women, the Chinese laundress, the Mexican seamstress Maria Santos, the elderly black woman everyone called Aunt Ruth. We came to speak our minds, Mrs. Chen announced. Nora invited them in, puzzled. The women arranged themselves in the parlor with grave dignity. This town talks, Aunt Ruth began. Always has. Talked when I came here after the war. Free woman in a white town. Talked when Mrs. Chen opened her laundry. When Maria started taking in sewing. What they say about you is what they said about us, Maria added. Improper women, not knowing our place. But we survived. Mrs. Chen said, made our lives, raised our children, buried our dead. Let them talk. Easy to say, Nora said. But you weren't accused of corrupting a good man. Aunt Ruth laughed, rich and deep. Child, I've been accused of everything under the sun. What matters isn't their words, but your truth. You helping folks or harming them? Helping, at least trying to. Then that's your answer. Keep helping, keep living. Truth outlasts gossip every time. After they left, Nora sat staring at the fire. Callum joined her. Silent support. They're right, she said finally. But it's hard, being the subject of such judgment. I know. He took her hand. But you're not alone in it. Whatever they say about you reflects on me too. I choose to bear it. She squeezed his fingers. This isn't what you bargained for when you offered shelter to a rain-soaked stranger. No, he agreed. It's become much more. That night, lying in her bed, she heard him working late at the forge. The rhythm of his hammer was answer enough to gossip steady work, honest living, truth made manifest in metal and spark. Tomorrow would bring more whispers, more judgment. But tonight, she had a roof overhead, work that mattered, and a man who stood beside her against the tide of propriety. Let them talk. She had chosen her path unconventional, perhaps, but honest. In the end, that would have to be enough. Through the wall. She heard Callum's hammer ring against anvil, constant as heartbeat, sure as sunrise. The sound of someone making something useful from raw material, shaping the world one patient strike at a time. She smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow, she'd hang their new sign, Reed and Wyatt Healing and Forging. Let the town see their partnership made public, professional if nothing else. And if her heart raced when he smiled at her over breakfast, if his touch lingered when helping with her cloak, well, that was between them and the walls that heard their careful courtship. Propriety had its place, but so did choosing love on your own terms, in your own time. Gossip be damned. Winter settled over Dust Hollow like a wool blanket, heavy and encompassing. Snow fell in thick curtains, muffling sound and softening the hard edges of the world. The forge ran hot from dawn to dusk as people needed repairs for sleds and shoes for horses navigating icy streets. Nora's rounds became treacherous, but illness didn't pause for weather. Their new sign swung outside the house, Reed and Wyatt Healing and Forging, ice crystallized but legible. The partnership had quieted some gossip, giving their arrangement a veneer of professional necessity. Still, whispers persisted like smoke through cracks. But inside the house, something had shifted. It started small, Callum's hand brushing hers as they reached for the coffee pot, Nora adjusting his collar before he left for the forge. Glances that lingered a heartbeat too long. They still maintained separate spaces, she and Margaret's old room. He by the fire, but the careful distance between them had dissolved like snow in spring water. One evening, as blizzard winds rattled the windows, Nora attempted to teach Callum to bake bread. Knead it like your working iron, she instructed, watching him attack the dough with blacksmith's strength. Gentler. It's not fighting you. Everything I touch turns out heavy as horseshoes. He grumbled, but his eyes held humor. She moved behind him, placed her hands over his, like this, fold and press, feel the rhythm. They worked the dough together, her body aligned with his, breathing synchronized. The kitchen was warm from the stove, golden in lamplight. Outside, the storm raged, but here was peace. Better, she said softly, still guiding his hands. He turned his head slightly, their faces close. Is it? The question held layers. She stepped back, brushing flour from her apron. It'll do. Let it rise by the stove. They covered the dough and settled by the fire. Callum had a book poetry. Surprisingly, while Nora worked on mending, But she found herself watching him instead of her stitches. The way firelight caught in his hair, now more silver than brown. How his lips moved slightly as he read. What? He'd caught her staring. Nothing, just, I never took you for a poetry reader. Margaret liked it, started reading to her when she was sick. He marked his place. Found I liked it too. Words doing what they're meant to. Nothing wasted. Read something. He hesitated, then opened the book. His voice, usually gruff, softened around the words. I have been here before, but when or how I cannot tell, I know the grass beyond the door, the sweet keen smell, the sighing sound, the lights around the shore. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither acknowledged. Nora set aside her sewing. That's beautiful. Rossetti, Margaret's favorite. He closed the book. Sometimes I read them and hear her voice instead of mine. Do you still miss her terribly? Every day, but differently now. He stared into the fire. For a long time, missing her was all I had. Held on to grief because letting go felt like betrayal. But lately, I wake up and my first thought isn't of what I lost. He looked at her directly. It's of coffee brewing and wondering if your patience kept you late and whether your laugh will fill this kitchen today. Nora's breath caught. Callum? I know. Too much. Too soon. He stood. I'll check the bread. But she caught his hand. Not too much. Just unexpected. Which part? The part where I feel the same. Where I catch myself humming while I work because happiness snuck in when I wasn't watching. She rose, still holding his hand. I came here running from love gone wrong. Swore I'd never risk that pain again. And now I think maybe the risk is worth it, with the right person. He cupped her face gently, thumb tracing her cheekbone. I'm not him. I'll never betray you, never give you cause to run. I know. She leaned into his touch. You're not him. I'm not her. Maybe that's why this works. He kissed her then, different from that desperate kiss weeks ago. This was slow, careful, a question and answer in one. When they parted, both were breathless. Stay, she whispered. Not by the fire. Stay with me. His eyes widened. Nora. I know what I'm asking. I know what it means. She pressed closer. I'm tired of careful, tired of proper, just stay. The talk will happen regardless. They've decided what we are to each other. Why not make it true? He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. You sure? I have never been more sure of anything. They checked the bread risen perfectly and shaped it for baking, working side by side. They prepared evening meals that had become ritual. But underneath routine tasks ran new awareness, electric as lightning. Later, as snow piled against windows and wind howled like wolves, they lay together in the narrow bed, not as desperate lovers, but as two people choosing comfort over isolation, warmth over cold distance. Callum's arms around her felt like harbor after storm. I should have asked properly, he murmured against her hair. Courted you right, flowers and such. You gave me shelter in a storm, fed me when I was hungry, stood by me against gossip. She turned in his arms. That's better than flowers. Still, you deserve proper things, beautiful things. I have them, a warm bed, useful work, someone who sees me clear and chooses me anyway. She kissed him softly. What else could I want? A ring, maybe someday when you're ready. The suggestion should have sent her running. Instead, she found herself considering it. Maybe someday. They slept entwined while the storm spent itself against the walls. Come morning, everything would be different. The careful fiction of separate lives would be harder to maintain. But for now, there was just this two damaged people choosing each other, building something new from broken pieces. Morning came bright and bitter cold. Nora woke to find Callum gone, but coffee waited on the stove. Still warm. A note. Checking the animals. Back soon. C. She dressed quickly, humming. The bread from last night sat perfect on the counter, golden crusted. She sliced it for breakfast, added preserves to the table. Callum returned with firewood, cheeks red from cold. Seeing her at the stove, he smiled, unguarded, genuine. Morning? Morning. Suddenly shy, she busied herself with plates. He crossed to her, tilted her chin up. No regrets. None. You. Only that it took so long. He kissed her forehead. The Olsen mare needs shoeing. I'll be at the forge most of the day. Mrs. Patterson's baby is due soon. I'll be checking on her. They moved through breakfast with new ease, hands touching as they passed dishes, smiles coming unbidden. When Callum left for work, he kissed her goodbye at the door, simple, natural, as if they'd done it 1,000 times. Nora watched him go, then noticed Mrs. Hutchins across the street, broom suspended mid-sweep. The older woman's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. Morning, Mrs. Hutchins, Nora called cheerfully. Morning. A pause. Sleep well. Very well, thank you. Mrs. Hutchins resumed sweeping, but a small smile played at her lips. By noon, everyone would know. But Nora found she didn't care. Let them talk. She had work to do, people to heal, and a man who'd be home for dinner. At the Patterson farm, she found the expectant mother in good spirits despite her discomfort. The baby was positioned well, heartbeat strong. As Nora packed her supplies, Mrs. Patterson caught her hand. Is it true about you and Mr. Wyatt? I don't know what you've heard. That you're together now? Proper together. Nora considered lying. But what was the point? Yes. Good. Mrs. Patterson smiled. He's been alone too long, and you look happy, really happy. Walking home through the snow, Nora realized it was true. Happiness had crept in like morning light, gradual but undeniable. She who'd sworn off love, who'd built walls against hurt, had let them all tumble down for a quiet blacksmith with gentle hands and grief-carved heart. That evening, as she stirred soup and Callum mended harness by the fire, she felt the rightness of it settle in her bones. No grand passion this, no desperate romance, just two people choosing each other daily, building something sturdy as forged iron, warm as fresh bread. Smells good, he said, not looking up from his work. Your bread made it better. You're learning. Good teacher. He set aside the harness, crossed to her. Though I might need more lessons, lots more. She turned in his arms, spoon dripping forgotten. I suppose that could be arranged. For how long? The question hung between them, weighted with future. How long are you offering? Long as you'll have me, forever, if you're willing. That's a significant commitment, Mr. Wyatt. It is. He pulled her closer. But I'm a man who keeps his promises. Ask anyone. I don't need to ask, I know. They stood wrapped together while soup bubbled and snow fell soft outside. In the morning, there would be patience and horses, gossip and judgment. But tonight there was just this, a kitchen warm with cooking, a house no longer empty, two hearts learning to beat in rhythm. Sleep beside me, he murmured. Echo of that first night. Not just tonight, all the nights. Yes, she answered, and sealed it with a kiss. The bread rose, the soup simmered, and in a small house in Dust Hollow, love grew patient and steady, shaped by careful hands into something that would last. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late January, delivered by a rider who didn't wait for reply. Nora recognized Rose's handwriting immediately, though the script seemed shakier than before. Dearest Nora, it read. Father passed 3 days ago. I know you have every reason to ignore this letter, as you did my last, but I needed you to know. He called for you at the end, said your name over and over. I told him you'd forgiven us. I hope someday it might be true. There are things here, Mother's jewelry, Father's medical books that rightfully belong to you, and things I need to say that can't be written. Please come, if only to collect what's yours. Your sister, Rose. Nora read it twice, then let it fall to the table. Through the window, she watched Callum working at the forge, sparks flying in the cold morning air. They'd built something good here, a life, a practice, a love that grew stronger daily. Why risk it for ghosts and old pain? But her father was dead. The man who'd taught her to suture wounds, who'd held her hand through medical school when others said women didn't belong. Gone, while she'd nursed her anger miles away. Bad news. She hadn't heard Callum enter. He stood behind her, reading over her shoulder, smelling of coal smoke and winter air. My father died. I'm sorry. He pulled out a chair, sat beside her. You want to go back? I don't know. Part of me feels I should have gone when they first wrote. Now it's too late for reconciliation. Is it your sister still alive? My sister betrayed me with my fiancé. That doesn't just heal because time's passed. No, he agreed. But hate's a heavy thing to carry. Gets heavier with years. She looked at him, this man who'd carried his own guilt about Margaret, who understood the weight of unfinished business. You think I should go? I think you should choose what you can live with. He took her hand. But whatever you decide, you won't go alone. Not this time. You'd come with me to Chicago. To Chicago, to hell itself if needed. His thumb traced her knuckles. You faced my demons with me. Least I can do is stand by you while you face yours. The offer broke something loose in her chest. What about the forge, your work? Olson's boy can manage for a few days. Town won't fall apart without one blacksmith. Or one healer, she murmured, already mental cataloging which patients would need checking before she left. So we're going... She squeezed his hand. I suppose we are. 3 days later, they boarded the eastbound train. Nora wore her best dress black for mourning, though she wondered if she mourned her father or the chance to reconcile. Callum looked uncomfortable in his Sunday suit, but wore it without complaint. The journey took 2 days. They spoke little, content with shared silence and occasional observations about passing landscape. At night in the sleeping car, they lay in narrow bunks across from each other, fingertips touching in the space between. Tell me about him, Callum said into the darkness. Your father. He was complicated, brilliant doctor, devoted to his work, less devoted to understanding his daughters. She paused, remembering. He wanted sons to follow his profession, got Rose and me instead. I think he loved us, but didn't know how to show it beyond teaching me medicine. He taught you well. Yes, everything I know about healing came from him. It's why his silence after I left hurt so much. I thought he'd understand choosing integrity over appearance. Maybe he did. Maybe he just didn't know how to say it. Chicago sprawled before them in the gray morning light smokestacks and church spires. Crowded streets and hurried faces. So different from Dust Hollow's simple lines. Nora felt her chest tighten as familiar sights appeared. The family home sat on a tree-lined street, unchanged except for black bunting on the door. Nora stood frozen on the walk until Callum's hand at her back urged her forward. Rose answered the door herself, thinner than Nora remembered, shadows under her eyes. For a moment, sisters stared at each other across 3 years of silence. You came, Rose whispered. You asked me to. Rose's gaze shifted to Callum. And you are. Callum Wyatt. He removed his hat. My condolences on your loss. Thank you. Please, come in. The house smelled of flowers and grief, that particular mixture of lilies and dust that marked recent death. In the parlor, mourners clustered in small groups. Nora recognized neighbors, her father's colleagues, family friends. Their whispers followed as Rose led them to a small study. "Charles is at the hospital," Rose said quickly. "He won't be back until evening." "I didn't come to see Charles." "No, but I thought you should know." Rose twisted her hands. "Can we speak privately?" Nora glanced at Callum, who nodded. "I'll wait in the parlor." Alone with her sister. Nora felt years collapse. Rose looked older, worn by motherhood and maybe conscience. When she spoke, tears tracked down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I've wanted to say that every day for 3 years. I'm desperately, completely sorry." "Sorry for what taking him getting caught making me a scandal." "All of it, but mostly for breaking your trust. You were my sister, my best friend, and Rose's voice broke. "I destroyed us for a man who barely notices me now." The admission hung between them. Nora had imagined this moment countless times. Planned cutting words and cold dismissal. But faced with Rose's genuine grief, anger felt hollow. "Why?" she asked simply. "I was jealous. You had everything father's approval, a profession, Charles's attention. I was just the pretty younger daughter, waiting for a husband." Rose wiped her eyes. "When Charles showed interest, I felt special for once. It was wrong, selfish and wrong." "Did you love him?" "I thought I did. Now." Rose gestured helplessly. "Now I have 2 children who rarely see their father and a marriage that exists only in public. You escaped. Nora, I'm the one still trapped." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Nora had run from scandal into freedom. Rose had embraced respectability and found a different kind of prison. "I can't forgive you," Nora said carefully. "Not yet, maybe not ever, but I don't hate you anymore. That has to be enough." Rose nodded, composing herself. "Father left instructions. His medical books, instruments, mother's jewelry, all for you. And this." She handed over a sealed envelope. Nora recognized her father's precise script. "For my daughter, the doctor." "He was proud of you," Rose said softly. "Kept every letter from your patients, every mention in medical journals. His colleagues thought him mad, encouraging a daughter in medicine. But he'd say, 'Nora has the hands and heart for it. Who am I to deny calling?'" The words undid Nora's careful control. She cried then for the father who'd loved imperfectly, for the reconciliation that would never come, for the sister she'd lost to betrayal and might never fully reclaim. Later, after tears were spent and practical matters discussed, Nora found Callum in the garden. He stood among winter bare roses, studying the house's elegant lines. "How was it?" "Hard. Necessary." She took his arm. "She's miserable. You know, Rose, everything she thought she wanted has turned to ash." "While you found gold in mud." "Something like that." She leaned into his warmth. "I want to go home." "We can leave tonight if you want." "Tomorrow. There are papers to sign, things to collect." She paused. "And I think I need to see Charles, to close that chapter properly." Callum's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Want me with you?" "No, this I need to do alone." That evening, she met Charles at the hospital where they'd once worked together. He looked prosperous, well-fed, slight paunch showing his easy life. Seeing her, his face cycled through emotions: surprise, guilt, something that might have been regret. "Nora, I heard you'd come back." "Temporarily." She kept her voice neutral. "I wanted to clear the air between us." Yes, good." He shifted uncomfortably. "I owe you an apology." "You owe me nothing. What's done is done." She studied him dispassionately, wondering what she'd ever seen beyond the handsome face. "I came to thank you, actually." "Thank me for showing me who you really were before I made the mistake of marrying you, for freeing me to find something real." She smiled slightly. "I have a good life now, work that matters, people who need me, a man who knows the meaning of loyalty." None of that would have happened if you hadn't betrayed me." His face flushed. "I suppose you hate me." "No, I nothing you, Charles. You're just someone I used to know." She left him standing there and walked out into the cold Chicago night. Callum waited by a carriage, snow dusting his shoulders. Seeing her, he opened his arms. She walked into them, feeling the last chains of old pain fall away. "Ready to go home?" he asked. More than ready. The next morning, they loaded trunks with books and instruments, her mother's jewelry, and a few mementos worth keeping. Rose stood on the platform as their train prepared to leave. "Will you write?" she asked hesitantly. "Let me know you're well." Nora considered, "Perhaps in time." "That's more than I deserve." Rose pressed a small package into her hands. "For your new life, whatever that looks like." The train pulled away before Nora could respond. She opened the package as Chicago faded behind them. Inside lay their mother's wedding ring. Simple gold worn thin by years. "She gave you her wedding ring?" "Our mother's." Nora turned it in the light. "Rose got the engagement ring with its big diamond. This was just plain gold. I always preferred it." "Will you wear it?" She looked at him, her blacksmith, her anchor, her unexpected love. "Ask me properly when we get home." He smiled, pulled her close. "I will." 2 days later, Dust Hollow appeared on the horizon like a benediction. The forge stood cold but waiting. Their house, truly theirs, now welcomed them with familiar rooms and the lingering scent of herbs and metal. That night, as they lay entwined in their bed, Nora felt the last weight of old grief lift. Her father was gone, but his knowledge lived on in her healing hands. Her sister was lost to choices made, but not perhaps forever. And Charles was simply the mistake that led her to truth. "No regrets?" Callum asked, echoing their new ritual. "None. You. Only that your father never got to see you happy. Really happy." She kissed him softly. "He knows, somehow. I'm sure he knows." Outside, snow began to fall, covering the world in fresh white. Tomorrow there would be work patients to see, horses to shoe, life to build together. But tonight they had a bed warm with sharing, a house that held no ghosts, and love that had grown from ashes of old pain into something strong enough to last. Rose's letter had brought her full circle from running away to choosing home. And home, she'd learned, wasn't a place but a person who stood beside you while you faced your demons, then welcomed you back with open arms. She was done running. Whatever came next, she'd meet it here, with Callum, in the life they'd built from broken pieces and careful trust. The ring sat on the bedside table, waiting for the right moment. But Nora already knew her answer, had known it since the night she'd stopped being a stranger seeking shelter and started being someone who belonged. The March thaw came early that year, turning roads to mud and filling the air with the promise of spring. Nora had been restless for weeks, starting tasks and abandoning them, staring out windows at nothing. Callum watched with quiet concern but said nothing, knowing her moods by now. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, water-stained from its journey. Rose's handwriting. Urgent this time. "Nora, forgive my writing again so soon, but I'm desperate. I've left Charles. The children and I are staying with Aunt Catherine, but she's old and the situation is temporary. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I'm dying, truly dying inside. The doctor says it's melancholia, but I know it's deeper. I need my sister. I need to remember who I was before I destroyed everything. Please, even if just to tell me no to my face. Rose." Nora read it 3 times before showing Callum. He studied the letter, then her face. "She's asking to come here. She's asking for help. Where else would she go? To the husband she chose over you. You don't understand, Charles. He's not cruel, just absent. He married her for appearance. She married him for security. Now they're both trapped." She paced the kitchen. "I can't take her in, but I can't ignore this either." "Why not?" She turned on him, surprised. Because she's my sister. Who betrayed you? Who took what was yours without thought? Yes, all of that. She slumped into a chair. But also the girl who held my hand during thunderstorms, who helped me hide my medical books from Mother, who knew all my secrets until she became the worst one. Callum knelt beside her chair. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants her to suffer as I did. Part remembers loving her before it all went wrong. She met his eyes. What would you do? I'm not you. I don't have your generous heart. You took me in. That was different. You were a stranger who needed help. She's family who chose to hurt you. They sat with the weight of that truth. Outside, melting snow dripped from eaves in steady rhythm. Finally, Nora spoke. I'll go to her, see what's really happening, then decide. When? Tomorrow. The Hendersons' baby came early. I need to check them first. But then, she sighed. Then I'll see what's left of my sister. But morning brought emergency little Tommy Chen burning with fever. His grandmother frantic. Nora spent the day fighting for his life, mixing medicines, cooling his small body, praying to whatever listened. By evening he'd turned the corner, fever breaking in a sweep of sweat. You stay tonight. Mrs. Chen insisted. He needs watching. Nora agreed, sending word to Callum. She dozed in a chair beside Tommy's bed, waking hourly to check his breathing. Dawn came gray and quiet, the boy sleeping naturally at last. Walking home exhausted, she found their house in uproar. Callum stood on the porch with a woman thin, travel-worn, 2 small children clinging to her skirts. Rose. I couldn't wait, her sister said, voice breaking. Aunt Catherine put us out, said she wouldn't harbor a woman who'd left her husband. I had nowhere else. You should have waited for a reply, Nora said coldly, exhaustion making her sharp. I haven't agreed to anything. I know, but the children... Rose gestured helplessly at the boy and girl, perhaps 4 and 2, watching with large, frightened eyes. I couldn't let them sleep rough. Mama, I'm hungry, the boy whispered. Something in Nora cracked. Whatever Rose had done, these children bore no fault. Come inside. We'll feed them first, talk after. The kitchen filled with awkward movement. Callum made porridge while Nora sliced bread, neither speaking. Rose huddled at the table, children pressed close, looking nothing like the proud girl who'd stolen a fiancé. Eat, Nora told the children, gentling her voice. There's plenty. They ate like starvelings, careful and quick. The boy James, Rose said, had Rose's dark hair, but something of Charles in his serious expression. The girl, Lucy, was all reed stubborn chin, watchful eyes. When did you eat last? Callum asked. Yesterday morning, maybe. It's been difficult. Rose's hands shook holding her cup. Charles cut off funds when I left, said if I wanted to shame him, I could starve for it. Why did you leave? Rose glanced at her children, chose words carefully. He brought his friend home, to our bed, while I was visiting neighbors. Her voice stayed level, but tears tracked down her cheeks. Said it was his right as a husband to seek comfort where he pleased, since I'd become so tiresome. Nora felt old anger shift, reshape itself. Charles's betrayal hadn't been limited to her, after all. Where will you go? She asked. I don't know. I have Mother's jewelry. I could sell it, find room somewhere, work, maybe, though I'm trained for nothing useful. Rose laughed bitterly. Perfect wife and mother, they said. Turns out that prepares you for nothing when the husband decides you're replaceable. Mama, Lucy tugged Rose's sleeve. Are we staying here? Rose looked at Nora, pleading silent. Nora felt Callum's steady presence behind her, letting her choose. She studied her sister thin, desperate, broken by choices made in youth, then looked at the children, innocent of their parents' sins. 1 week, she heard herself say. You can stay 1 week while we figure out what comes next. Thank you. Rose's relief was painful to witness. I know I don't deserve... You're right. You don't, but they do. She indicated the children. We'll put you in the spare room. There are rules. You help with housework, meals, whatever's needed. This isn't charity. Of course. Anything. Later, while Rose settled the children for naps, Nora and Callum stood in their bedroom, door closed. You sure about this? He asked. No, but what choice is there? Turn out my sister and her babies. She rubbed her temples. 1 week, long enough to make plans. And if she can't leave after a week, if there's nowhere to go, then we deal with that when it comes. She looked up at him. Are you angry? Concerned for you. He pulled her close. You've built a good life here. I don't want her bringing Chicago's poison with her. Neither do I. But maybe... She paused, working through thoughts. Maybe this is how it finally heals. By choosing mercy over justified anger. He kissed her forehead. Your generous heart again. I just hope she deserves it. She doesn't. That's what makes it mercy. The week passed in strange rhythms. Rose proved useful cooking, cleaning, mending with skill Nora hadn't expected. She was different than the spoiled girl of memory. Motherhood and abandonment had carved away vanity, leaving someone quieter, harder working. The children brought unexpected life to the house. James followed Callum to the forge. Fascinated by the work, Lucy shadowed Nora on her rounds, carrying bandages with solemn importance. Their laughter filled empty corners. They're good children, Nora told Rose one evening, watching Lucy carefully water the kitchen herbs. They're all I did right. Rose's voice held no self-pity, just fact. Everything else I touched turned to ash, but somehow they're perfect. Not perfect, but good enough. They worked side by side, preparing supper. The ease of old childhood rhythms surprised them both. Do you remember, Rose said suddenly, when we used to make mud pies in the garden? Mother was horrified, but Father just laughed. I remember you eating one on a dare, and being sick for hours after. Rose smiled, years falling away. You held my hair while I was ill, told Mother it was bad fish, not stupidity. You were 6-year-olds do foolish things. 24-year-olds too, apparently. The admission hung between them. Nora could have pressed the advantage, twisted the knife of memory. Instead, she handed Rose another potato to peel. On the 7th day, Callum approached Nora privately. The room above the smithy's been empty since my apprentice left. Needs work, but it's warm, dry, private entrance. You're suggesting Rose stay. I'm suggesting those children need stability, and maybe... He chose words carefully. Maybe having her close but not underfoot might let you two heal proper. Distance didn't work. Maybe proximity will. When did you become so wise about sisters? I've been watching you all week. How you soften when Lucy laughs. How you and Rose fall into old patterns without thinking. He touched her cheek. You miss her, the real her, before it all went wrong. I miss who we were. That's gone forever. Maybe, or maybe you build something new, like we did. That evening, Nora made the offer. Rose wept grateful tears that embarrassed them both. Plans formed quickly. The apartment needed cleaning, furniture, but between them they could manage. Rose would take in mending to pay rent, help Nora with nursing when needed. The children would have space to grow. Why? Rose asked as they swept the dusty rooms. After everything, why help me? Nora paused, considering truth. Because anger's exhausting. Because those children deserve better than grudges. Because... She met her sister's eyes. Because I've learned that broken things can be mended, even if the seams show. I'll make this right, somehow. Just make it work, that's enough. Moving day came bright and clear. The whole town seemed to appear bringing furniture, dishes, offers of work for Rose, Mrs. Hutchins sniffed about. Another Reed woman causing talk, but brought fresh bread. Even Murphy donated blankets, grumbling about charity cases. That night, Nora stood at her window watching lamplight glow in the apartment across the yard. She could see Rose tucking in the children, their shadows moving like a puppet show on the walls. "Regrets?" Callum asked, joining her. "No, questions, maybe about what comes next. Same thing as always, day by day, choice by choice." He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "She's not staying in our house. That's boundaries enough." "She's in our lives, though. Permanently now." "Family usually is." He turned her to face him. "But she's not us. What we have stays ours, private and protected. This just adds to it, doesn't replace it." "Promise." "I promise. Besides," he smiled slightly, "those children already worship you. I have competition for your affection now." She laughed, tension breaking. "Lucy asked if she could call you Uncle Callum." "What did you say?" "That she should ask you herself." "Clever woman. Let me be the one to melt at those big eyes." They prepared for bed in comfortable rhythm. As Nora brushed her hair, she noticed her mother's ring still on the dresser, waiting these past months for the right moment. "Callum, you never asked properly, like we discussed." He stilled, understanding immediately. Moving carefully, he picked up the ring, then knelt beside her chair. "Nora Estelle Reed, you've already said yes in every way that matters. But would you do me the honor of making it official? Will you marry me?" "Yes." No hesitation, no doubt. "Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the worn gold band onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if waiting all these years for this moment. They kissed, soft and sure, tasting promise in it. "When?" he asked. "Soon. Spring maybe, when the flowers bloom. Tomorrow wouldn't be too soon for me." "Patient man. You've waited this long. Worth every minute." Later, lying together, Nora twisted the ring, feeling its weight. Through the window, she could see the apartment dark now, her sister and nieces sleeping safe behind her. Callum breathed steady and warm. She'd left Chicago broken and running, but here in Dust Hollow, she'd found more than shelter. She'd found work that mattered, love that lasted, and now, unexpectedly, family restored. Not perfect, not without scars, but real. Tomorrow, Rose would start her new life. The children would explore their freedom, and Nora would continue her rounds. But tonight, she simply held still in the center of her rebuilt world, grateful for the strange paths that led to home. The ring caught moonlight as she moved. Such a small thing to hold such large promises. But then, the best things often were quiet, simple, and absolutely true. Spring came to Dust Hollow in a rush of wildflowers and warm winds. The prairie bloomed purple and gold, and even the dusty streets seemed softer somehow. It was the kind of morning that made promises seem easy to keep. There would be no wedding, not in the traditional sense. Anyway, no white dress or church bells or rows of witnesses. Nora had worn white once before, stood in a Chicago cathedral planning a future that turned to dust. She wouldn't repeat that mistake. "Just us," she told Callum. "Maybe the pastor to make it legal. Rose and the children if they want, but nothing more." He'd understood, as he always did. Whatever makes you happy. What made her happy was this standing in their kitchen at dawn, him shaving at the small mirror while she braided her hair, moving around each other with practiced ease. No ceremony needed for what they'd already built. "You sure you don't want anything special?" he asked, catching her eye in the mirror. "Flowers, at least." "Look outside. The whole prairie's in bloom. What more could I want?" He set down his razor, crossed to her. "Have I told you today how lucky I am?" Not yet today. Well then, he kissed her, soft and thorough. I'm the luckiest man in Kansas. A knock interrupted Rose with the children, Lucy clutching a handful of prairie roses. For Aunt Nora, the girl announced solemnly. Since she's getting married today. They're perfect. Nora knelt to accept them, tucking one behind Lucy's ear. Will you hold the rest during the ceremony? Lucy nodded, glowing with importance. James hung back, still uncertain of his place in this new family dynamic. James, Callum said. I could use a best man. Interested. The boy's face lit up. Really? Can't think of anyone better. They walked to the forge together, not because tradition demanded it, but because that's where their life together truly began, where she'd watched him work that first day, seen strength in his scarred hands, where he'd built horseshoes and hope in equal measure. Pastor Williams waited, having agreed to a simple ceremony despite the church board's preference for proper proceedings. Mrs. Hutchins was there too, claiming she'd just stopped by, fooling no one. Doc Morrison had returned from his travels, standing witness with a knowing smile. Dearly beloved, the pastor began, but Nora interrupted. Just the necessary words. Please, we know why we're here. He cleared his throat, adjusted. Do you, Nora Estelle Reed, take this man to be your husband? I do. No hesitation. No doubt, she'd chosen him 100 times already in shared meals, in quiet evenings, in the way they moved through crisis and calm together. Do you, Callum Wyatt, take this woman to be your wife? Every day for the rest of my life. The rings. Nora wore her mother's band already. Callum had forged new simple iron bands he'd made himself. Nothing fancy, but strong enough to last. He slipped hers on next to the gold, 2 metals intertwined. Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. They kissed while Lucy threw prairie roses and James clapped, and even Mrs. Hutchins dabbed at her eyes. No grand celebration followed, just coffee and sweet rolls in the kitchen, stories and laughter until the children grew sleepy. That's it, Rose asked later, helping clean up. No party, no gifts, no grand announcement. We announced it. We're married. What else matters? Rose shook her head, smiling. You always were different, even as girls. You never wanted what others did. I wanted love, real love. Just took a while to find it. And now? Nora glanced through the window at Callum teaching James to pump the forge bellows. Now I have everything. The days that followed were remarkably unchanged. Nora made her rounds checking on Mrs. Patterson's new baby, teaching Thomas new signs, mixing medicines. Callum worked the forge, shaped metal, mended what was broken. They came home to each other at day's end, sharing meals and memories and the quiet satisfaction of promises kept. The town adjusted. Some still whispered about propriety, about a couple living together so long before marriage. But most had accepted that Nora and Callum did things their own way, and that way seemed to work fine. Rose settled into her new life with surprising grace. Her mending business grew steady. She helped Nora with nursing duties when extra hands were needed. The children thrived, James learning the forge trade, Lucy becoming Nora's constant shadow on medical rounds. She wants to be a doctor, Rose confided one evening. Like her aunt. There are worse ambitions. Charles would hate it. A daughter in medicine. Rose laughed, but without bitterness now. Good thing his opinion no longer matters. Word had come that Charles had filed for divorce, claiming abandonment. Rose signed the papers without protest, free at last from a marriage that had been prison more than partnership. Summer deepened. The forge ran hot. Keeping Callum busy with harvest preparations, Nora delivered 3 babies in 1 week, sat vigil with the dying, taught mothers how to keep fever at bay. Their house became a hub, patients coming for treatment, neighbors stopping to chat, children running through chasing barn cats. It's too much, Callum said one evening, finding Nora asleep over her mending. You need help. I have help. Rose assists when real help, trained help. He sat beside her. What about teaching someone, passing on what you know? The idea took root slowly. There were young women in town with quick minds and gentle hands. Sarah Morrison, the doctor's daughter, had often expressed interest. Maria Santos's eldest girl showed natural healing instincts. By autumn, Nora had 2 apprentices. She taught them as her father had taught her anatomy over breakfast, wound care using butchered chickens, the importance of clean hands and careful observation. The kitchen became a classroom, the town their training ground. "You're building something," Callum observed, watching her direct the girls through suturing practice. "A legacy. Someone needs to continue when I can't." "That won't be for years yet?" "No, but best to prepare." She leaned against him. "Besides, teaching them teaches me, makes me better." Winter arrived gentle that year, snow falling soft as flour. Their first anniversary approached, if counted from the wedding, privately. Nora marked time from that first night of storm and shelter. "What do you want?" Callum asked. "For anniversary. Should mark it somehow." "I have what I want. This life, this home. You." "That's not an answer." She considered. "Remember that first morning you made coffee? We shared bread, neither of us knowing what came next. Hard to forget. Let's do that. Just that, coffee and bread and quiet morning together." So they did. Rose took the children to town, leaving them rare solitude. They sat at their small table, sharing simple breakfast, remembering the awkward strangers they'd been. "Did you know?" Nora asked. "That first night, did you know we'd end up here?" "I knew I didn't want you to leave. Rest came natural as breathing." "I was so angry then. At the world, at love, at myself for needing help." She traced the wood grain of the table. "You gave me space to heal. You gave me reason to—" He caught her hand. "Before you, I was just existing, going through motions, keeping busy so I wouldn't have to think. You brought life back to this house." "We brought it back together." A knock interrupted, urgent, demanding. Nora sighed. "So much for quiet morning." But she rose, answered, found young Tom Brennan panting on the porch. "It's Ma baby's coming wrong. She's screaming something awful." Nora grabbed her bag. All anniversary thoughts forgotten. "Callum, hot water and clean cloths. Tom, run for my apprentices. Tell them breech birth. Come quick." The next hours blurred the Brennan farmhouse. A baby turned wrong. A mother weakening with each push. Nora worked steadily. Sarah and Maria following her lead. Callum keeping water hot and husband calm. When the baby finally came, feet first, but breathing the room collectively exhaled. "You did it, Mrs." Brennan whispered, clutching her newborn son. "We all did it." Nora checked both patients once more. Sarah managed the cord perfectly. Maria kept you calm, team effort. Walking home as dawn broke again. Callum took her bag. "Hell of an anniversary." "Perfect anniversary. Bringing life into the world, can't think of better celebration." "Mrs. Reed." He used her new name deliberately, making her smile. "You're a strange woman." "Lucky for you." "Luckiest thing that ever happened to me." They reached their door as full sunlight painted Dust Hollow gold. Inside, coffee waited. Rose had come by, left a pot warming. Fresh bread, too, still warm from her oven. "See?" Nora said. "We got our quiet breakfast after all. Just delayed." They ate in peaceful exhaustion, watching the town wake outside their window. The forge would need firing soon. Patience would need checking. Life would continue its steady rhythm. But for now, there was this two people who'd found each other in storm, chosen each other in calm, built something lasting from broken pieces and patient hope. No regrets, their ritual question. "Only one," Nora said. Callum's eyebrows rose. "What?" "That first night I should have known. Should have recognized home when it opened the door." She smiled, soft as morning. Would have saved time. We had time, still do. He pulled her close. All the time in the world. Outside, Dust Hollow stirred to life. Inside, two people held each other, needing nothing more than this coffee and bread and the quiet certainty of love that had grown from shelter into forever. She'd slept beside him just one night, that first night. But from then on, she never left again. Not in all the years that followed, not through drought or plenty, sickness or health, the babies they raised or the losses they weathered. She stayed, and he stayed. And together they proved that sometimes the best love stories aren't about grand passion or dramatic gestures. Sometimes they're about opening a door in a storm, about coffee in the morning and bread shared in silence, about choosing each other, day after day, until choosing becomes as natural as breathing. Sometimes love is just coming home and knowing someone will be there, waiting with the lamp lit and the fire warm. And sometimes that's more than enough. It's everything. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to know where in the world you're enjoying this tale. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about the story. If you enjoyed following Nora and Callum's journey, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like, and don't forget to hit the hype button to help more listeners discover this heartfelt story. Your support means everything.